And I'm going to begin by welcoming you to our inaugural virtual assembly training series. This is number 7 of 9. And so thank you all. I see many familiar faces that I've seen at some of the other sessions. So thank you very much for your participation and support. We really appreciate it. My name is Claire Roberts, and I'm a member of the Rotary Club of Lomar to Sunrise, and I currently serve as the district trainer for our district. I'll be the moderator for today's session. And I would like to begin by introducing our district governor-elect, Mark Roberts.
Good afternoon, fellow District 5160 Rotarians. Thank you for joining us for this afternoon's presentation. I'm really excited about it because one of my favorite Rotarians is presenting it. Kathy and I really spent most of our careers in nonprofit organizations. And when you think about it, every Rotary Club, it's a club, but also, especially if you have a foundation or a endowment fund, you are already running a small nonprofit organization. So Kathy has a lot of great ideas and experience to share with you, and I'm really delighted that she, as my successor as district governor nominee, is sharing her expertise with us this afternoon. So thanks so much for joining us.
And last but certainly not least, it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter. Kathy Suvia offers us her experience in 30+ years of nonprofit leadership, holding various board and staff positions. Before retiring, Kathy served as executive director of 2 community-based organizations and is a recognized consultant in the field of board training and strategic planning. She has an MBA in nonprofit management, at leadership, and is an advocate for lifelong learning. And as Mark said, Kathy will be our district governor in 21-22. So with that, I turn the floor over to Kathy. Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks to Mark. Thanks to Claire for asking me to do this. I'd also like to just express my personal thanks to Kathy Anderson, a member of the Rotary Club of Reading. Kathy is one of my personal professional mentors in the field of nonprofit boardmanship, and she was very instrumental in creating this presentation. Unfortunately, she's not able to be with us tonight, so I do appreciate Kathy's involvement in that. Rotary clubs, while unique and autonomous, are held together with 35,000 other clubs in our common mission. Together, we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. We also share commonalities with millions of other organizations whose missions we may or may not agree with, but we're all joined together in making a difference for a particular reason important to those members. What unifies us, what unifies us all is our structure as nonprofit organizations. And along with that comes certain obligations to support and respect the organizational structure. This short lesson this evening is condensed from a day-long training. It's not intended to give you complete instructions on running a small nonprofit, but will give you an index of resources and ideas to help your Rotary Club to run more smoothly, more efficiently, and ultimately provide more opportunities for lasting change. Okay, Claire. So let's begin with the big picture. What are Rotary clubs governed by? The 2019 Manual of Procedures, it's available from rotary.org for $10. I'll show it to you. Those of you who can still see my picture, we lovingly refer to it as the MOP. It's the Manual of Procedures. Provides Rotary leaders with constitutional and governance documents needed to run a club. Every club should have a copy for use by the officers and board members. The MOP includes the Rotary International Constitution, Rotary International Bylaws, Standard Club Constitution, recommended Rotary Club bylaws, and the bylaws of the Rotary Foundation. And speaking of bylaws, do you have a copy of your own club's bylaws? If not, try to find them, or you might need to recreate them, as many clubs have done, and that MOP would be very helpful to you in doing that. Another valuable document is your District 5160 Policy Manual, which was just recently updated and approved, and that's available on the district website. Two resources that Kathy Anderson and I always recommend to clubs and nonprofits are Cal Nonprofits. It's Cal Nonprofits, CalNonprofits.org. It's a membership trade organization, but they have many resources available for free. I highly recommend them. Another is a book called How to Form a California Nonprofit Corporation. It's available from Nolo Press, that's NOLO.com, and it's essentially the Bible of nonprofits. Both resources offer accurate directions and tips on everything from starting a new nonprofit. Those of you who might want to be looking at a 501c3 affiliate to your Rotary Club. Also to deal with unexpected complications that arise. Great resource. So now let's talk a little bit about compliance. The best resource that we can recommend is the Nonprofit Compliance Checklist from Cal Nonprofits. It is one of the documents that's available for free on their website. The checklist offers ways to keep track of your club's compliance responsibilities every year. It's a handy and comprehensive checklist to help nonprofit 501c3 organizations keep up to date with annual filing requirements. Now, those of you who have an accountant or an attorney that works with your boards, they're probably doing this service for you. But some of the smaller clubs don't have that. And if you're a board member of an organization, you probably need to know what that advisor is doing for you. So this checklist is really helpful. It has links to the resources that you might need if you have questions. A section of that checklist that might be very useful to clubs is the guidance for nonprofits that have had or are planning a raffle. This section includes, yes, another checklist, but it also includes the government raffle registration form and raffle report documents. A word of caution here. Bingo, charity poker, and Monte Carlo are regulated by the Bureau of Gambling Control with their own set of regulations. It's all doable, just follow the guidance to protect your club. All right, budgets. I know that some of you are smiling when I mention budgets, and some of you are groaning. I'm not necessarily a numbers first kind of person, but I'm a huge believer in the power of a budget. Not only does it create a history of your club's financial ability and contributions, it's an invaluable planning tool. Now that gets my attention. The process of creating a budget can help you think clearly about what you hope to accomplish and where you'll find the funds to achieve your goals. A budget will help you focus on short and long-term goals. A budget will help you plan strategically, and then your club may not be able to deliver its promises to the community if you have to go out of your budget. Budget allows you to set some spending limits, keep your costs in line, and grow by maximizing your current resources. And finally, something we're all familiar with this year and have become far too familiar with, budgeting process can help you think through how your club will pay for some unplanned expenses or adapt to the reality of canceled fundraisers. I'm going to stop right there for a minute and say, Claire, do we have any questions so far?
We do not.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead then and talk about the board. As defined by the National Council of Nonprofits, and I quote, board members are the fiduciaries who steer an organization towards a sustainable future by adopting sound, ethical, and legal governance and financial management policies, as well as making sure the nonprofit has adequate resources to advance its mission. Let's talk a little bit more about what that really means. Go ahead, Claire. Each member of the Rotary Club has specific duties, but as a whole, they're responsible for working together for the benefit of all of the members. Take a look at this list. These are all big picture responsibilities: planning, monitoring, ensuring integrity, and promoting a good public image. Those are the things the board as a whole is responsible for. The next slide lists several responsibilities of the individual board members. These are things like attending your club and board meetings. Now that seems like a given, but in many organizations, we know that's not necessarily always true. Attend the meetings, be active at fundraisers and other events. Attend the district functions to represent your club, to get training and updates, and to get ideas from other clubs. Be prepared for your board meetings by reading any supporting documents ahead of time. You know, in the old days, we used to say, don't show up at the board meeting and open the packet that was mailed to you while you sit down. That's not so true anymore because most of our documents are emailed out, and so it's a little easier to hide that you haven't looked at them yet. So do your organization a favor, do your president a favor, and review those documents ahead of time. Stay informed about changing policies from Rotary International. That takes us back to the MOP. Maybe you want to even get your own copy of the MOP. Again, it's available at rotary.org for $10. It's pretty simple. They'll put it in the mail to you right away. And a responsibility that I am particularly emphatic about is once the board has made a decision, don't be the Lone Ranger announcing to the members that you didn't agree with that decision. Stand as one with the other board members. Once a decision is made, it's the board's decision. You are a member of that board. If you can't support it, at least don't get in the way. We have any questions, Claire?
We do. We actually have several.
Okay.
The first one comes from Kimberly. Where do we find the definition of a board in writing?
Oh, there are lots of places you can Google it. Now, if you're speaking particularly about a Rotary board, Google that, Rotary Board of Directors, Rotary Club Board of Directors, and you'll get a pretty clear definition. But if you go online and just Google nonprofit board, you'll get those definitions. They're quite available. Cal Nonprofits would be a good source for a reputable, dependable definition, and NOLO Press also. So there's lots of sources out there. But the board is the responsible entity for the organization. And you know that old saying about what rolls uphill, it rolls uphill to the board.
Kathy, this is Conrad Brace.
Yeah, hi Conrad.
One of the confusions is I just have had it since I just sent out a list of our officers for the next year. And people say, well, am I a director or am I an officer? And so the board of directors consists of the people with the named title who are officers, as well as the people who are chairs of, in our club, the committees.
In your club, each club has the ability to define those roles as they please, as it works for the club, as long as we're talking about the club. Once we start talking about a 501c3 organization, your nonprofit corporation, then the state identifies who the directors are, and they are the officers of the corporation. You identify that in your incorporation documents to the state. So
I agree with you.
Yeah, your own club bylaws will be probably the best guidance for you on that. It should be spelled out in there. So I'd recommend to all of you, if you're not sure about your club, find your club bylaws and see what it says. Yeah.
We do have another question, Kathy, from Susan. How can the board best approach improving public perception of Rotary and getting the word out to the community about what good works we are doing?
That's a great question, and it's one of those challenges that all of our clubs struggle with. And I would tell you that the district struggles with that, as well as Rotary International. We're also busy doing good work that we're not very good at showing what we do. As a board, in promoting the public image of your corporate or your organization, it's up to each of the individual members to share with their network in the community what you're involved with, share what you're proud of, do it on a one-to-one basis, and then support those efforts from the members in your club who are much better at marketing and promoting. If they need help to promote a particular event, jump in and help them. But a lot of it is just one-on-one.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's all right. I was sort of adding another thing there. You know, another thing about that is, as a board member, know that you represent your organization even when you don't have a Rotary shirt on, even when you don't have a Rotary pin on. If your friends and coworkers and peers in the community know that you're a representative of Rotary, everything you do falls back to Rotary and represents Rotary. That was particularly evident to me as executive director, as management in small nonprofit organizations in small towns. And I used to tell my team and remind my team all the time that when you step out of the doors of this organization, you're still representing this organization. That means when you're at the grocery store, people look at you and they identify you with this organization. So really be aware of the image you're promoting all the time.
One question from Jim is, should the immediate past president remain on the board?
Again, that's really up to your club. The suggested bylaws from Rotary International include the immediate past president as someone who would be on the board. Personally, I think it's a good thing because that person helps you to have some history and some continuity. There isn't a complete rollover each year. Rotary is unusual in that even at the highest level, the leadership changes each year. And so to support the continuity, it's important for those, especially the immediate past, to stay on. Now, if there have been problems with that person, if there has been some communication challenges with that person, perhaps 2 or 3 board members can take that person aside and encourage them to support the new president. But essentially, it's a good thing. In a normal situation, it's really a good thing for that immediate past president to be on the board.
The next question comes from Mary Lou. Does the foundation board report to the club board, or is the club foundation autonomous?
Again, I have to refer you back to your own bylaws of your organization. There isn't a blanket, it has to be this way. The bylaws of your club and the bylaws of that 501c3 nonprofit corporation will specify where the reporting is. I can tell you that it obviously works better if the 2 organizations, the 2 boards work in unison. So there should be some connection, some dovetailing between them, at least some reporting. It would be very helpful if the president-elect, or the immediate past president at least, is a board member of your nonprofit corporation, and there should be a tie-in reporting back and forth. But they are separate organizations.
Good, great. One last question. What if we've lost our club bylaws? What should we do? Should we look at the MOP and start from there, or do you have other suggestions?
Well, I would say, and that is not an unusual situation. So kudos to you for asking that question. It's probably a question that several of you are thinking. My own club did a review probably 6 years ago. And it was during the time that I was president-elect, and I kept asking for the bylaws. And some of the older members kept saying, oh, we have them somewhere. We have them somewhere. We used to have them. I'm sure they're in the storage, or maybe Ted has them, or maybe Gino had them, or maybe so-and-so had them. So we did a pretty extensive search through all of the longer term members of our organization, and no one seemed to have a copy of the bylaws. So essentially we recreated them. We used the standard template that came from Rotary International. We made the changes that were appropriate to our club, and then we had them approved by the club and filed them with the Secretary of State. So you can do that. You certainly can do that. I would also, if you're going to create new bylaws, I would really encourage you to keep them as simple as possible. These are not policies and procedures. You don't want to have to change your bylaws every time you start to do something a little different. The bylaws are really the guiding principles of your club. They include things like who are the officers, when do you elect new officers, what are the duties of those officers, not the details of how they do their job, and the financial requirements that you have in your corporation. I hope that's helpful to you.
Kathy, these documents are not available from the Secretary of State. Bylaws are not available. Articles are available.
Articles of incorporation, yes, yes.
So if you want to continue, we have a couple more questions, but we can save them for a little bit.
Okay, all right. Yeah, let's see if we still have them at the end. Let's move on to the next slide. So for those of you who are planners like me, this will probably be your favorite portion of the workshop. This is all about the planning. For the rest of you who are not planners at heart, planning really helps you to enjoy and maximize your year. In your planning calendar, be sure to include the Rotary International designated monthly activities, the traditional club events, the big local community events that might affect whether or not your community members attend your event, or whether or not your members are even able to participate if there's a big community event that's kind of an all hands on deck event, or that everyone wants to attend. And also, I would really just say, be sure to include the district events. Make sure that your big club events don't conflict with district assemblies, the district conference, the foundation day, those important things that happen in our district, the awards banquet. Those are really important to include in your club calendar and make them part of what you share with your members each year as things that we do. So let's just see who out there, and you can just, let's see. Claire, can you tell if someone raises their hand?
I can.
Who can tell me what is the theme for February in Rotary International? No one?
So far,
Okay.
nobody's guessing.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll just tell you. It's the Peace Building and Conflict Resolution Month. So in February, if you're not sure as a club leader what your club should be focusing on, take that guidance from Rotary International and maybe do something. Get a speaker on peace building and conflict resolution. Let's look at another one that's really important to us. August, the theme for August. Anyone know what that is?
Membership.
Membership. Who said that?
Bernie.
Bernie, good for you, Bernie. Yeah, membership. So again, if you're not sure what all those months are, the easiest way to do it, you could go to the Rotary website, but it's easier to just Google and say Rotary International monthly themes, and you'll get a whole list. They include things like vocational services, youth services, education and literacy. So each month there's a different topic of items and issues that are important to us in Rotary. Okay, let's move on. Several of you I know were on the webinar last night with Candy Pierce, and Candy did a great job of talking about some of the ways to really make your Rotary Board meetings more effective. I'm not going to repeat all the things that Candy told us, but I will point out a few things that she stressed. First and foremost, she said, make it fun. If your board meetings aren't fun, people are not going to get up and go to a meeting at 6:30 in the morning, if that's when you have them, or stay after a long day at work to do that. So make them fun. And be courteous and respectful of everyone's time. Start and end your meetings on time. If you still have other business to conduct, then take a poll of the members there and find out, are people willing to stay another 10 minutes so you can complete that agenda? Or can you table some of those items to a later meeting? How you do that is really dependent on the agenda that you set. So an agenda was Candy's third point, and I have to agree with her. Have an agenda and follow it, and put those things that require perhaps a little bit more attention, focus early on in the meeting so that you don't lose people as you go on further. A real simple tip there is to just create a template and use that each month or each week, and fill in the things that are different for each meeting, but put in those standard things. That would be a time when you could put in those announcements of things that you know are coming up. Put those in your template. And create a list of to-do items or action items. That was one of Candy's tips. But I'd really recommend that you go on the district website probably by the end of this week, or at least by the beginning of next week, and spend a few minutes just listening to Candy's webinar from last night. It was really helpful, and she focused a lot on nonprofit and Rotary Board meetings. Okay, so as you can probably tell by now, I am a structure and procedures geek. But before I scare too many of you off prior to the 2021-22 year and you say, oh my goodness, what have we got ourselves into? I want to just share that I'm a believer in having a structure in place that allows us to be flexible and adaptable. If we know what we have planned, then we can be much more adaptable. I hope I've given you a few tips to allow you to do the same. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions that popped up.
Thanks, Kathy. I'm going to stop sharing the screen right now so that we can see more people. And we do have 45 people on this session, so you can't see everybody, but you can see more people. Yeah. So a couple of questions that came in were, from Michelle asked, what are your opinion on term limits?
I'm actually, okay, are we talking about Congress or are we talking about Rotary clubs?
It doesn't say. I think they're talking
Rotary clubs. I'm sure we're talking about
Rotary clubs, yeah. But we'll just decide that that's what they're talking about.
We'll just talk about that later. I am a big believer in term limits. Now, having said that, I don't believe that every officer needs to turn over every year, but I think there should be a break. And in your bylaws, this is a good place to articulate that, to say maybe the secretary, for instance, will serve a 3-year term, and that can be renewed for another 3-year term. Oftentimes in nonprofit corporations, board members can serve multiple terms, but there is a requirement after a certain period of time that everyone step off the board. That's really for their protection as well as yours. Board members that stay forever have the opportunity. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm not saying that this always happens, but if the same person does the same job without anyone else looking at that forever, then there's a chance that something could be hidden. And so it's a good thing. It's to clean the slate a little bit and rotate people off.
And that kind of dovetails into Scott's question. Is there a requirement that clubs contract for a periodic audit? It seems that would help ensure some of the areas that we're discussing would be focused on.
It's really dependent on the amount of money coming in and out of your budget. I'm not an accountant, and so I'm not really going to try to even answer that, but it depends on the amount of money that you have. A Rotary Club is not required to have an audit. Even our district is not required to have an audit, but we do have an audit review each year of our finances. So there are various ways to look at your finances, and at the very least, you would want someone, an audit committee, for instance, to look at the books of your club annually.
And Kimberly shares that her club has an internal audit committee. So that's one of the options that you have as well.
And that would be a good item to list in your bylaws. So the bylaws would also list those I don't want to say standing committees, but those required committees, like a finance committee and an audit committee that your bylaws require your club to have.
Taylor had a question in citing that this may have been covered yesterday, but how do you provide some guidance on meeting minutes? How detailed should they be? Do they need to be printed, signed? Should they be sent out to all members? Just some high-level guidance on that, Kathy?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And I guess the good news is that Candy Pierce and I are in pretty much agreement on that topic. You probably know that Candy, like I, has spent a good part of her career working for and with nonprofit boards. So, and Robert's Rules of Order, which is pretty much the standard that we all use to function in, the guidance that we use, the umbrella that we use for the structure there, indicates that minutes should report what happened at the meeting. They don't and probably shouldn't report who said what. For instance, if I were doing the minutes of this meeting of this club that we have right here, I wouldn't say Claire said this, Kim asked this, Sasha asked that. I would say that there were questions around the topic of agendas. There were questions around the topics of club officers. And if we had a vote, if we make a decision, that's what goes in the minutes. So minutes don't need to be really detailed, especially for a smaller Rotary Club. They're really the history of your organization. You don't want all of that detail in there.
Thanks, Kathy. Jan asked, if bylaws don't include policies and procedures, how do you keep them up to date and in front of the board every year?
So policies and procedures are a separate document, and that definitely should be reviewed by the board each year. Your bylaws don't necessarily need to be updated every year. They should be looked at, and they should be general enough that they don't need to be changed unless something major happens in your organization. Policies and procedures probably do need to be looked at and updated periodically, especially in changing times. I mentioned that our district policies and procedures were just recently updated, and I think George, Mark, one of you can probably help me on this, but I think it's been about 4 or 5 years since our district policies and procedures had been updated completely. And so we did a major revision of that. In some ways, with the policies and procedures were updated, and I think you'll find this in your clubs. As time goes on, members find a better way of getting things done. Technology changes, opportunities to do things different happen. So oftentimes updating your policies and procedures is really just bringing them in line with what has actually been happening.
If I can just add to that,
Yeah.
Kathy and I worked on that along with Tina Akins and John Dwyer over the past year. And what we recognized was, for some reason, some of those policies and procedures had become very, very rigid and specific, which told us we needed to, return some flexibility there, because you don't want to have a policy and procedure for every possible situation. You want the policies and procedures to provide you with guidelines, but not, you can't anticipate every possible situation. So, don't even try. Please keep those policies and procedures, at least somewhat flexible.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. And that's, I think guidelines is the real key there. That's what they are. Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions that are in the chat box. Does anybody have a question? If you want to raise your hand or unmute yourself. This has been a pretty well-behaved group. I think we can trust you. Michelle, you want to unmute yourself?
Sorry, I missed what you said about the board members on both the club and the foundation board, if you have that. So did you say that it was good to have like dual-hatted or duplicate people on that, or it wasn't good? I know you mentioned it, but I didn't hear what you said.
I don't think it's necessarily a need that it be all of the same board members. For one, if you have a foundation board, you want some people on there who have grant writing expertise, who have grant review expertise and financial expertise, as well as outreach to the community. Those aren't necessarily the same skill sets that you have in a Rotary Club board, where you have a club service chairman or a youth service chairman. So, but there should be some commonality, and there should be in the bylaws of both organizations some reference to how the two agree and support each other. The foundation should not be out doing things separate from what the club members want. The foundation is the philanthropic arm of the club, and so there needs to be a tie, but not all the same people.
Claire?
George
This is
Chafee-
kind
George-
of timely.
Go ahead, Michelle. Did you have another question,
Oh, I
Michelle?
was just had a follow up because this is kind of timely. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello? Oh,
Yes, we
sorry.
can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, it's a little timely. I don't want to be too specific, but it's also kind of a potential solution that might be of interest to other people. That we're looking at our bylaws for both the club and the foundation, and we would definitely want them to be in sync. And so we're looking at having with our grant committee, that's kind of the common organization, so that you have the chair of the committee be a foundation member, whether it's a treasurer or somebody on the board, and then all of the other members be required on the committee to be club members. And so that way the club members are the ones that are directing where the grant writing is going, and what the strategic vision of the club is, in terms of that philanthropic piece.
Good. Okay.
And so I'm just wondering, does that sound like that's workable and a good thing to do, or what do you think of that?
So we can just call the Victor.
It absolutely sounds like it's a good thing to do. I think you're on the right track. That would be my impression. Yeah.
George
Okay.
Chafee, did you have a
Terrific.
question
Thank you.
or a comment?
No. No, I've sent one.
Oh, okay. All right.
Claire?
Conrad?
So one of the things that I have found very helpful, and I hadn't seen it in a lot of organizations since I've been on the board of, is when Tom Guyette puts the agenda out, we're supposed to have a 1-hour meeting, and he budgets the time on the side of the agenda for each item. And if we're going over that time, he asks whether the discussion needs to be continued, or are you ready for a decision? Sometimes meetings go on for way longer than they need to, because nobody knows what the time expectation is or is permitted. And a lot of these things don't get clearer just because you talk about them more.
Did you see Taylor's question? Okay.
Conrad, I think that that's a really valid and important point, and we did talk about that quite a bit last night. Candy really stressed the importance of thinking ahead about allocating time for some of the things that are on the agenda. A lot of that comes back to the person who's leading that board meeting too. If one member has gone way past their time in reporting on an activity, for instance, an event that's coming up much longer than expected, then it's up to the president or the person leading the meeting to kind of call an intermission there and say, is this something we can continue at a later date? Or do the members want to postpone discussion about these other items? So the leader is really key there, but having those time guidelines on your agenda are helpful so that everyone knows what's coming up. Yeah.
Tom Guyette calls those offline conversations.
Yes. Okay, so we have a question from Taylor. When we solicit donations from the public online, what should we publish on the website? 501c3 tax ID, IRS letter, are there legal requirements, or just guidelines?
So honestly, that's a question that's above my pay grade. I really would recommend and refer you to an accountant in your club or your tax advisor who's working with your club, because there are some guidelines around that.
George Chafee, did you have a question?
Yeah, I guess just a follow-up comment, because I think Kathy may have touched on, or Candy did, but back to Conrad's issue and running out of time, or the time frame, and all of that is all really good, and I'm wholeheartedly support that. Another thing to keep in mind is, if one item is the most important thing on the agenda, there's nothing wrong with making that the number one thing. ahead of committee reports,
Right.
secretary minutes, old business, new. If it's number one important, make it number one so that you, if you know it's going to take a lot of time, you don't hit it later on in the meeting. No matter how much time you allocate it to it, put it number one while everyone's fresh and they're there and they're doing it. And because a lot of times we get hung up on, well, we've got to do a certain order of the agenda. And the agenda, frankly, doesn't matter. It's what's number one, what's number two, what's number three, or whatever you want to do. So you get through it. Just a-
Couldn't agree more. Put those important items up front. And then if you lose members later on in the meeting, you've accomplished what you really needed to get done. The reports can follow later. Yeah.
that's gold. That's exactly right.
And
I agree.
thanks, George. I believe that we have answered all the questions that are in the box, and we are at time. So thank you. There's a lot of really, a lot of people are saying thank you very much for a great presentation, Kathy. Yay, yay. And thank you all for being with us. And we hope to see everybody soon. Take care. Have a great evening.
Have a
I
nice
guess they decided the 11th hour to